The young men and young women you see in this picture, right here. What we do every day, we wake up. Our efforts, our initiatives, our goal is to change people's lives.
Let's go ahead and give the Wendell Scott Foundation, StoryCorps, and the NASCAR Hall of Fame another round of applause for this amazing event. When my good friend Warwick Scott called me last week and said, "Hey Neff, would you be willing to help me out and moderate the Q&A?" I said, absolutely, I'd be honored to be a part of something like this. And I find it very interesting that today is the first day of Black History Month. So I hope that all of us have learned a little something by watching this amazing production. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and have our panelists come on up and join us in the director chairs. So when I call your name, please come up. First, we're going to have Frank Scott, Wendell Scott's son, whose voice you heard in the animation. I'm going to ask Frank to come on to the front. Warwick, Wendell's grandson, he's right up front, so he'll just come on and grab his seat. And then Maya Millette, who you heard from earlier, the executive producer with StoryCorps, is also going to participate. And last but not least, Terry Davis Jr., who is also a grandson of Wendell Scott. And what we've envisioned for this evening is really an interactive discussion. This is your opportunity to get up close and personal with the folks who are involved with this project. And so we want you to raise your hand, ask questions, give your comments, let us know what you think or what you thought about what you saw earlier. And I think what we're going to do is, if you do have a question or a comment, raise your hands or perhaps come to the front and we can pass you a mic. I believe that's the plan. Okay. And I'll get it started with just a softball question just because I'm nosy. I want to know, how do we get to this place? I'm obsessed with StoryCorps. I own a public relations firm, and we were talking about StoryCorps in a meeting a couple weeks ago and how great it is. So I want to hear from you as panelists, how did you guys end up sharing your story with StoryCorps?
Well, they came to Danville, and they were at the Science Museum, Science Center. And Warwick told me about StoryCorps, and I was really reluctant to do it because we were involved with, during that time, with the Marsville Speedway weekend, and the schedule was so tight, and I really just said, Warwick, I really don't want to do that. And he goes, "Dad, come on, this is gonna be great." And he told me a little bit more about it. So I said, I gave in like I usually do to my children. And we came down to this soundproof trailer, and that's where it all started. And Warwick asked me questions, and that's how it started. So.
Awesome. That was my softball question. Who out there has a question, a comment?
And actually, even before we start,
Yeah, go ahead.
I can, just to piggyback off of how I can explain more about where and how you can participate in StoryCorps, if that's
perfect.
helpful. So we have permanent recording booths in a few different cities around the country, one in Chicago, one in San Francisco, one in Atlanta. And then we also have what we call our mobile booth, which is an Airstream trailer that's tricked out with recording equipment that travels to different cities around the country on our mobile tour and makes stops, and you can sign up in the different cities and for a recording and do an interview that way. And we just debuted this past year an app. So now you can download the StoryCorps app and record interviews in the comfort of your own home, and upload them directly to the StoryCorps website. So there are a few different ways to participate.
Question. There's the mic.
Hi, I'm Chris. I've introduced myself. Just watching the short, I heard a lot about how Wendell was at the racetrack, but how was he as do you have like a favorite moment of him as like being a family man, and I guess just elaborate on what it was like to live in the house with him?
One thing that's I remember very vividly about my father, we weren't allowed to use the words can or never in my household growing up as children. And even in his garage, if you would come in and say, oh, Wendell, you ain't gonna never outrun Richard Petty, he'd tell you, get out of my D garage. Or if you happen to say it at the dinner table, he'd tell you, he'd look at you. He had mood eyes. You could always tell my father's mood by looking at the color of his eyes. And the darker his eyes got, the more serious he became. And he would say, get up from the table and come back when you get your head right. So I remember that about him. But he was always such a great father. And he would tell, he told me once, he said, now, you're gonna make mistakes in life. He said, but don't run around trying to find somebody to help you get out of it and make the situation worse. He said, that doesn't mean I'm not gonna punish you. But he said, I'm gonna punish you with love. So that's the kind of father he was. Let us speak to grandfather.
And this will be good right here. My vivid memories of my grandfather stem from him picking me up to take me to school in the mornings and picking me up in the afternoons after school. And he would tell me these stories while we were driving. And as a child, the stories seemed like kind of like science fiction. And as you get older, you kind of start realizing like, hey, this stuff really happened. And I remember there was never a time where he and I were together where it wasn't someone walking up to him saying, hey, Wendell, how you doing? It's good to see you, or asking for an autograph. And I'm 7 years old, we're eating a cheeseburger and a hot dog, and it's the entire time we're eating, it's just people coming up to the table the whole time. And he was always so gracious. He was always so humble. And the other thing that I remember vividly his hands. His hands were, they were battered, man. I mean, his nails were smashed. He had really big knuckles, real big hands, and you could just, and that as a grown man, as I sit here and think about it, I'm really thinking back to all of the things that they didn't have during their racing career. And all of the lug wrenches he had to tote, and all of the tires that had to be changed, et cetera, et cetera. So, I remember how he looked physically, and him working on those cars and stuff well into the night, deep winter, hot summer, didn't matter, and so those are some of the things that I remember. TJ?
Well, my memories are similar to Ward's. I actually grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, so we took trips to Grandma's house, and my mom drove all times of day and night. But the thing was, if you wanted to have some time with Papa, you had to get up real early in the morning, like way before the sun. And you might be able to sit at the breakfast table with him, but he was gone to the shop early. If you could get up early enough, I remember sitting on his lap and rub my face against his whiskers, and he just look at you with them blue eyes. And then he come home late in the evening. Remember Grandma, Sky, don't put them dirty clothes on my bed. Or sitting at the dinner table and people would come to the house and visit, and I would try to sit in the corner and be quiet and listen to the adults talking. He would just sit there and tell stories and be funny. Then I'd be giggling in the corner. He'd look at me like, you got that? Because he would tell a story very serious with a straight face, but everybody in the room is laughing. And it was hilarious, and it was just a great time. And he was just a hard worker and a true family man.
Wow. Great question. We have one up here in the front, and I think one further back.
What was it like to tour the Deep South when you didn't have money for gas or food?
Well, that was quite an interesting experience. My father was like, he could improvise in a situation. He knew where we were going, what we were going to face, and he would always prepare himself for that. If we knew that we were going in a part of the South where we couldn't buy gasoline, he would take extra gasoline in cans. You know, he knew that we wouldn't have a place to stay. So a lot of times we'd go into a town, say Augusta, Georgia, Valdosta, Georgia, Macon, Georgia, anywhere, Florida, and we would board at people's homes in the community. And he always knew people, he would actually take them to the race, and we could maybe rent a room at somebody's house. But there were other times we were out on the road where a picnic table was like the Holiday Inn. And we would stop and we would race to the picnic table. Who would get there, and we would sleep in the truck, sleep on the ground. We always, but you know, it wasn't a thing where we became disencouraged. He was just always so inspiring. I can remember in Columbia, South Carolina one night, and we had burned up a differential, and we had a winch on the truck, and the winch burned out. So we couldn't pull the car, we couldn't drive it up on there, couldn't pull it up on there. So we had to use the old hand cranker and get people to push, and I was so tired. And he said, son, he said, it's all worth it. He said, one day, boy, they're gonna write a book about me. Now, you know, they've made movies and they've been books and things like that. So he was always encouraged, but never ever did he ever think about quitting. I remember one time we were racing in Waycross, Georgia, and we were pulling with a 54 Packard, and there was a steep incline coming out the track, and the motor mount broke. And the fan went into the radiator and punctured a hole, and it had to be 100 degrees that day. So he said, I gotta fix that radiator. So we came to this truck stop, and it had signs out there, no color allowed, on the side of the road. And he told us, give him that baseball cap. He put a baseball cap on his head, and he said, y'all stay in the car. My brother and I, Wendell Jr. and I, and my other brother's here. Where's Michael? I got another brother here this morning, today. That's Michael. But Michael was too young, he wasn't with us. And so we had another guy named Bro Robinson. So he said, y'all stay in the car, don't get out. So he went into the garage area. They came out and took the radiator off the car, went in, they soldered the radiator and put it back on the car. And we, you know, and didn't even charge him anything. They didn't know who he was. And when he got back in the car, he said, and we pulled off at lot, he said, I'll tell you what, I was in World War II. He said, but I was more afraid today than I ever been in my life. But just those things, like he could always, you know, find a way to make it. Thanks for that question.
Great question. I saw someone in the back, I thought. Go ahead.
I was invited tonight by Maya. I was her Uber driver. Yeah. But I was her Uber driver because I'm a car fan. We were talking in the car. I'm a car fanatic, and I have been since I was a little kid. But I used to watch the movie, I don't know, in maybe the mid-'70s, with Richard Pryor, Grease Lightning. And that was my favorite movie. I watched it over and over and over. And some of the things that I saw him do in the car, I would go and imitate with my car in the street. You know, I was inspired by him. But what I wanted to know is, has anybody else, any of the other sons, grandsons, been interested in motorsports at all?
Of course, we all are. I mean, we all grew up in racing. My Wendell Jr. actually raced in several races back in the 70s, early 70s, when one time my father had a medical situation, and he actually raced in about 6 or 7 races. We all, you know, it was part of our life. I mean, that's what we did. We built race cars. We raced all over the country. Matter of fact, there's another gentleman in here tonight, Raymond Arnold from Spartanburg, South Carolina. He was on our pit crew. Raymond, hold your arm up, wherever you are. Raymond, yeah. So it was a family affair. Everybody, of course, we've been involved in racing our whole life. But it takes money to race, and it kind of did that. So we're still involved.
I never had true aspirations to race. I was a student athlete. I played basketball in high school, and during those development years, you got to start really early. And so I never really got the race car driving bug, but the bug that I did catch as a young man was making sure that my grandfather's legacy is told in totality, and making sure that what he did impacts future generations. Because he was a savant, and from an educational standpoint, he was an engineer without the formal education. And his story is so inspirational. And being able to segue motorsports with STEM education mixed in with youth who, like I said earlier, the reception people have basically given up on. So that's my car I drive, every day of my life. It's my life's work.
Let me share some incredible historical information with you all. I want you to take a visual trip with me. Think about it in 1953, when my father first raced on the old Daytona Beach course, when nobody knew he was a black man. He had yet to receive his NASCAR license, so he went there under an assumed name. Later in 1953, he was actually granted a NASCAR license. And he raced on the Daytona Beach course, which was a 4.1 mile length course, 2 miles down the sand against the water, onto Route 1, 2 miles, and back onto the sand. Back then, there went anywhere from 75 to 100 cars in a race. I have documented evidence that my father raced there in 1954, 1955, 1956, 1957, and 1958 before they built the International Speedway. Now this is one black man competing against, as a minority, competing against everybody else. But my father never looked at race as an obstacle or something that he could not overcome. He just he wanted to race, and he wanted to be known as a great father. But can you imagine the courage and the nerve that he had? One year he started 97th position and got up to 3rd place, and the engine gave out, and he ended up finishing 63rd or 60th position, whatever. But this was a field with over 100 cars, and Winston said that he can tell you, if you look into the archives, his name is in there. His name is in there, and the times that he did finish the race there, he finished no worse than 33rd position. That's out of 100 cars. So this is the type of courage that he had. People don't know these types of things about him. But this is some of the things. This is a little bit about Wendell Scott. So more questions. Somebody asked me a tough one.
Yeah. Are we
Yes.
getting the mic? Okay.
Yes, my name is Wayne Rookie. I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Scott back in the middle 60s. As a matter of fact, I went to a race in Charlotte, North Carolina with Mr. Arnold, who was a pit crew member. And I didn't know the impact at that point in time that he was making as a race car driver. As years passed, I would tell people that I met him and those boarding houses that Frankie spoke about a moment ago. He came, the family came and stayed in Inman with Arnold's aunt on one of those trips. But I guess this is a two-part question, Mr. Warwick. During that time, did you understand your grandfather's profession, and did you ever have any aspirations of becoming a race car driver?
The first time I remember seeing Grease Lightning on TV, it was a Saturday morning. It came on the TBS network, right? I used to watch wrestling, Magnum TA, Dusty Rhodes. I was waiting on wrestling to come on. Wrestling didn't come on. I had a meltdown. and then Grease Lightning comes on. And I remember asking either my dad or my mom, hey, is this about Papa? And that was the first time that I really kind of grasped, you know, what his legacy meant. Like I alluded to earlier, I just like to be around him and my grandmother, just period. My father was a basketball coach growing up, and he was a very successful basketball coach. And we traveled a great deal, my grandfather and I together, one-on-one in the car, you know, at nighttime, riding through dark country roads, and he would slump down and start chewing on his thumb. And he would start telling me all of these stories. But more importantly, as I look back on it, it was the wisdom he was imparting in me, the seeds he was planting. I mean, you know, growing up the way all of the grandchildren did, you know, we had a dual education on race relations growing up. We were born to believe that we just had to be tougher than everybody else in the room, and not tough from a physical standpoint, but more so mentally and spiritually. You know, we were raised to be as tough as my grandfather. He would oftentimes say to me, you know, before he would drop me off to school, he would say, I want you to be better than, not as good as. And I remember that, and it, you know, it stuck with me. When I decided to pursue the Wendell Scott Foundation, as Mr. Kelly alluded to earlier, it was the night of the documentary that was shown here in 2010. My wife and I were riding home, and we were talking, and I just started crying like a baby. Right when we hit Greensboro, I just got real emotional and started crying. And it wasn't that I did not enjoy or appreciate the documentary, but it was that I knew that it was so much more to not just my grandfather's legacy, but our family's legacy. And, you know, I wanted to be a catalyst in bringing that into fruition in order to try to save lives. And as God has blessed us thus far, we have been able to do exactly that.
Okay, I want my oldest son to reflect in some of his memories of his grandfather, Frankie J.
Good evening, everyone. I had an idea before I do any reflection, because I know different people have questions. Maybe if we could, if you have a question, if you kind of make a line up here, then we can hand the mic to one another. So we can do that. That probably, you know, all the Scouts are kind of long-winded sometimes. So we have a lot of stories, and, you know, as you hear, we have the desire to share these with you all. So maybe if someone has a question for me, maybe I could.
I want you to tell a story of your grandfather and you.
Gotta tell a story. I guess I have so many stories. Well, this is how I'll answer that, do that. Like my cousin and my dad and my brother have shared, you can't do stuff. So I guess I didn't hear the you can't do it, or don't say can't as much as I saw it. So I guess that's the legacy part for me. I'm an educator in Richmond, Virginia. You know, I taught 3 classes a day, drove from Richmond 4.5 hours, gonna go back at night, get up, do it again in the morning. That's part of the, you know, people say you can't do it. No, I'm gonna do it, get it done, you know, be there, you know, tomorrow. So I think that's my legacy piece, or what have you. Know, like Warwick said earlier, our missions have always been to serve and be accountable and respectful, and, you know, be a man or a good citizen, good woman for the Scott women. You know, all that's important, and we try to live by example. So I think all the people that have come from miles around, you learn that. If you didn't get it from your background, you got it from ours. So, come on, Dan. We had another microphone. Where's the other microphone? We want to take the microphone from the moderator. I'll get that one. Oh, you get it. Okay. This is my high school classmate, Miranda.
You asked for a hard question. So each one of you had, from the stories that you're telling, you've had a different perspective for what your father or your grandfather meant. So we've seen the changes of the current, today's life. We witness a lot of racial frustration. We see the youth in a different light. What, if anything, do you think he would impart on the generation of today? If he were here to see some of these things, what do you think, maybe 3 things he would like to impart on the generation of today?
Well, one thing he would tell them is to listen to your parents. And he would also tell the parents to teach your children. He definitely would do that because he was a person that he wouldn't. He would allow you to make a mistake, but he expects you to behave yourself. And he would definitely do that to children. But he would be even more determined to do what the Wendell Scott Foundation is trying to do. You know, because of the apathy that so many children have. Children, I had kids to write essays in school. And one of them was like 7 questions. And the last question was, what is your ambition in life? What do you plan to do in the future? And you would be surprised how many of those kids would say, well, I don't have any ambition because I'm not going to live that long. I probably won't live past 18 years old, so why should I set a goal? See, these are the things that, because these kids feel so disenfranchised. They feel like, a lot of them feel like no one cares. And that's why the Wendell Scott Foundation is so important. It's another man in the audience, I gotta recognize Ray Wilborn. He provides transportation to the foundation to transport kids from area high schools in Danville to the Advanced Learning Center to learn of STEM education. He provides transportation for us. I know you didn't want me to say it. And he doesn't ask for anything in return. So it takes a village to raise kids. And he would encourage families. Of course, the church is a vital part of the upbringing of kids. You know, he'd be disappointed at some of the things, but he would never give up because quitting was never in his vocabulary. You know, never quit.
Another question?
You next.
My name is Dylan Smith. I'm from Vermont. I've been racing cars for like 19 years now. I don't really have a question.
Vermont?
Yeah, Vermont.
Okay.
Yeah, I race at Ken Squire's racetrack. I don't really have a question. I just want to let you and everybody in here know something. I've only raced in the South for the last 2 or 3 years. I've lived here for 6, raced for a couple years. I'm in Langley, Virginia, and I talked to your brother, Wendell Jr., about the track because you guys raced there a couple times, and he was just telling me some stories about the racetrack. And I'm there, and we're racing, and I haven't been able to race in a couple years, so I'm really excited. And the people are great. They treated me like family. So I'm out there, and we're doing all right. We're struggling a little bit, but we're doing all right. I've struggled my whole life with racing, being underfunded just like you guys were, and so we're there, and the car breaks. You know, I come down pit road. I don't know what it was. I get out of the car, take the hood off the car, reach in there, look at my guys, fix it, get back in the car. We only went down like 1 or 2 laps, and I wanted to make sure I finished the race. After that, everyone was like, man, you look like Wendell out there. And I've done so many papers and essays over, you know, my education career of Wendell, and to hear that was really cool. And then I was able to find a sponsor and I raced in Greenville and Anderson, South Carolina. And I was very, well, not nervous, but like, you know, I hadn't been down there before, and these people, I don't really know anybody, so I'm down there and I'm racing, and everyone wants to come up to me and talk to me about Wendell. Everyone wants to talk to me about Wendell. Man, I saw him race here. It was awesome. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I want you personally to know how much you and your family has affected my life. This is for me to come here tonight. I was invited by work, and to be here tonight and to see the message. I really needed it because I ran for the diversity program last year. I'm not in the program this year. I don't have any sponsors right now. I don't override. And the no quit message, it just really hits hard, and I really appreciate it. So.
Thank you. Don't quit. Keep going. Keep going. Go ahead, Brian.
I've gotten to know the Scott family the past couple of years, and you guys are just an amazing group. And I personally want to thank you guys for everything that you've done for me and our team, the NASCAR Pecan Free Series. It really means a lot. And I'm trying to think of a good question, but I just want Scott. I just want Frank to tell more stories. But I would like to make a request to the crowd that everybody in the crowd, if you could, be sure to share the video on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever social media outlets you use. Be sure to share their story, and I think it's going to reach a lot of people. And I had a quick question for StoryCorps. How many man hours or woman hours did it take to create this?
Man and woman hours, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a complex project, I suppose.
Yeah, so each short takes about 3.5 months to produce. And before we begin actual production, work on the animation itself, we do tons of research. Our animators meet with the participants, the storytellers. So Julie, our animator, met with you folks. And we do that so that we can, a lot of times if we're meeting directly with the subjects of the stories, it's so that when we're animating them, we can do more than just draw them in their likeness, but we want to talk to them so that their movements that we see in animation are the same, that they can recognize themselves in their animated selves. And we look through tons of photos, and so that all happens before we even start production. And then the actual animation production itself is 3.5, 4 months.
Thank you.
Wow.
Evening, y'all. I would say that I'm one of the family's closest friends. That's who I am. You know something? They are real modest. They got we left it at home. Well, we have the President of the United States that wrote the Scott family and friends and gave them a recommendation saying that Wendell Scott is the man that gave him the inspiration to continue on to become President of the United States. I don't have to ask anyone, but I asked Frank Scott. Is that true?
Yes. When we had, the mayor of Danville went to Washington, D.C. after we did the dedication service of the historical marker in Danville, the garage. And Mayor Saunders went there. They invited him to come to Washington, D.C. So he met with the president. He said, yeah, and he told him that, I'm from Danville, I'm one of those guys. He said, this sounds like President Obama. He said, now, Wendell Scott was an amazing man. That's what he said. He did write us a letter. We do have a letter of encouragement. So I don't know about him wanting to be president, but he does know who Wendell Scott is. And he described him as an amazing man. And I quote, that's what the president said about my father.
Impressive.
Go ahead, John.
Next question.
Thank you very much. I met the Wendell Scott family in November of 2014, but when I was a young man, maybe 12 or 13 years old, I remember the movie Grease Lightning coming on TV, and my whole family's race crazy family, like probably most of the people here are. And my dad coming in there telling me, "Come on here, watch this. Come on here, watch this movie. This guy's from Virginia." And I came in there and watched it, and it really didn't dawn on me until I met you guys in November of 2014 how, and I've said this a number of times, how I saw my life come full circle as a little boy watching this movie, insignificant at the time. And then when I met y'all at the Martinsville Speedway, it was incredible to me, incredible experience. But I think the question I wanted to ask or have you talk a little bit more about is that, Wendell Scott was a very Christian man too, very strong in the faith. And I know that because I know you all closely, each and every one of you, how and in your own faith. But I think sometimes we need to talk about that a little bit more, how inspired he was in his faith. And also, I've talked to the Wood brothers and I've heard Richard Petty speak and talk about how much support they gave Wendell Scott. I mean, I understand he had his struggles for a number of reasons, but he was also, a lot of people respected him in the sport and realized how little resources he had, and I know they gave him parts, gave him engines, and a number of things. And I think I heard you one time, Frank, talk about it. I think an engine went out midway through a race, or something to that effect, and someone gave him an engine, and he went on to race that race. Is my memory correct?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about it.
Thank you.
We were racing in Martinsville, and my father blew an engine. I was going to school at North Carolina Central University, and I had a class, and when I got there to Martinsville Speedway, everybody was waving me down the road. Your father said, "Hurry up," when you had a lookout for me. So I was gonna stop and get my NASCAR pit pass, and they told me, "No, your father needs you. Come on, you come back and get that later." Well, he had blown the engine, and he wanted the motor out of my car. I had a racing motor in my car, and when I got there, he had taken the motor out of the race car, and we went over into the infield. We had a truck that we had gotten from the Petties that had actually a chain thing where we could put a thing to pull the motor out. So we actually pulled the motor out of my personal car, which was a 427 with 2 4-barrels on it. So it wasn't no jump motor. And it also had a stroker kit in it. It had been de-stroked from 427 back to 374 for those of you that know motors. We actually got the stroker kit from the Wood brothers. That's why they were so tough in Martinsville for so many years. We found that out. But anyway, we had to change the intake and put a single 4-barrel carburetor on it, change the oil pan, put a different pickup. But actually, he actually raced that Sunday. And the ironic thing about it is that after the race, he had to take the motor out the race car, put it back in my car, and get back to school. So we left there about 11:30, 12 o'clock that night. But it was determination. He told me, he said, "Well, I'm gonna take that engine from you. That thing is tough." But let me tell you a little bit about a situation at Lakewood Speedway in 1955, April 25th. My father, it was a mild dirt track, banked on one end, flat on the other, clay track, dangerous track. My father was being very successful in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. And so he heard about this race at Lakewood. So he called the promoter and asked him if he came down, would they let him race? "Yeah, we'd be glad to have you. Come on down, Wendell." And they advertised, and this Negro driver's coming, gonna be here, and sold a lot of tickets. And when he got there, the ambulance company told the promoter that if he gets hurt, we're not taking him to the hospital. So they came to my father. He had driven all the way from Denver to Atlanta and told him that he wouldn't be able to race. So my father could always improvise and come up with something. He could always, if he needed a tool, he'd make it if he didn't have it. He would alter stuff. He would do it. And so he said, "Well, don't you all have black funeral homes in Atlanta?" They said, "Yeah, we got 2 or 3. He said, "Well, call them, tell them to send a hearse out here. If anything happens to me, put me in the hearse or just take me to the hospital in a car." So they said, "Well, okay, maybe that's an idea." So about half an hour later, this black hearse comes across the track. So, okay, Wendell, he missed all his qualifying, all the practice, never driven that track before. He said they can start at the rear of the field and race. So he was excited about that. And so after the race started, a driver by the name of Roy Bobbitt, got involved in an accident on the backstretch. And he ended up having a skull fracture. Those helmets weren't made out of nothing but cardboard back then. And so they jumped in the ambulance to go get Roy and take him to the hospital. And the ambulance wouldn't start. It went click, get the jumper cables. They hooked jumper cables to it, click, click, click. So guess what they did? Put him in the hearse and carried him to the hospital. Now, what happens next was the sad part about it. They came to my father and said, your ambulance is gone, so you gotta park your car. He didn't get the race. He didn't give him a dime. But you know what? He didn't let it stop him. It inspired him to keep going. We went back to Atlanta. We were racing the Atlanta 500. We would always take a second car with a car that was outdated on the Sprint Cup series. We would take it and he would race at local tracks on Friday. If the 500-mile race was on Sunday, he'd try to find a track somewhere in the vicinity. We'd race, like we come to Darwin, we race in Florence. We come to Atlanta, we race at Lakewood. We actually went back to Lakewood that was in '55, about 10 years later. And he got to race at that track. But that was determination. He just always figured out a way to keep going. So that's one of the stories. I saw some people want to ask questions, so go ahead, Mike's my brother.
And time is running out, unfortunately. I could listen to you tell stories all
Let my brother
night
say what he's
long.
gonna
But
say.
we said two more questions, right?
Let my
And
brother
then we're
say.
just asking that you
I'm
make
done.
it brief.
I'll be around. Go ahead, Michael.
Go ahead.
I was sitting back, I was listening to all the great stories. My father truly was a great man to me. And for anyone that knew him, they would say the same thing. He loved everybody. Okay. But I could tell you a lot of great stories about him. But the one thing I want you to know, he was a great educator. The things I go through daily, I can go back to where he had already educated me on it. That's how I handle everything, whether it's small or little. And I just want you to know, one of the greatest things about Wendell Scott was he was a great educator. And that's what I just want you to know about it. I love him. Love my family.
Thanks, Mike.
One more question? Two. I've got to go for two more questions.
I have witnessed what the Wendell Scott Foundation has done in the city of Danville for its Danville public school system. I have a cheerleader who has exceeded the expectations. She's no longer shy, and she was a cheerleader and she made my squad. She was great. But she's now considering college, and that is because of Shanique and Warwick. But my question is, we talked about a motor other race car drivers donated. What did the city of Danville do when he was racing, and what are they doing now to embrace the foundation?
Well, Warwick can speak more, but the city of Danville has been supportive, not as supportive as they could have, should have been. But understand this, and my father realized this, the life has a generational component. And maybe what he did then is inspiring them to create opportunities for the Wendell Scott Foundation. And I think that we are getting some residuals from that. And they came to the induction. They haven't dug deep in their pockets yet. But we're hoping that they're going to be inspired to do so, because they really do need the Wendell Scott Foundation to work with those kids. Let me mention one more thing. I'm gonna finish. Because this is important. This is important. I made a trip to Manhattan. I can't remember the date. MSNBC, they interviewed me there. It was about the Confederate flag. And I don't know what they expected from me. But I told him like I thought my father felt and what we would do. He taught us how to deal with that. See, the Confederate flag doesn't bother me so much. And we know there are hateful people that don't even have a flag. So what he taught us how to deal with that. You know, it's 3 of us and there's 20,000 other people. First of all, you can't win anyway, you know, if you try to fight back or whatever. But he did it with such dignity. But he would say this. He would say, just mind your business. You know, do what we came to do. We came to race. You know, if you're going to get insulted, you're going to get threatened, don't retaliate. Keep on moving. He said 99.9% of the time, they're not going to touch you. They're just going to taunt you. He said, but don't ever run. Don't ever run. Don't stimulate the dog mentality. Go about your business. And you know, so, and I was inspired by the stand that the president, CEO of NASCAR took concerning the Confederate flag in NASCAR tracks. And even Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Jeff Gordon, icons of the sport, spoke against this. So, you know, we can't get stuck in the past. You know, you got to move forward. And as you go, if you can, as I spoke earlier about Dr. Martin Luther King, you know, that he stated that love is the only force in the universe powerful enough to turn an enemy into a friend. So that's what we are as Wendell Scott Foundation, as a family. And we still feel that way, you know. So anyway, I'm done. I hope I said something.
Thanks for sharing.
As it relates to, Trina, you mentioned your student athlete. I want to make one small correction. She is going to college. She's not planning on going. She is going to college. And part of the reason she's able to do that, once again, is because of the sacrifices that my grandfather and my family made. I mean, when we created the foundation, you know, our mission is to take what this man did and all that comes with it and make sustainable educational opportunities readily available for all youth, black, white, green, purple, or red. Right. So she's going to college. I know exactly who you're talking about. I had a real drill down with her just the other day. But she's going to college, and as it relates to the city of Danville, Danville is home. Everything needs some form of improvement. We would like to see not just Danville, but the entire state of Virginia, to be quite honest with you, get more involved with what we're doing in the form of a Wendell Scott Art and Science Museum. I'm just going to shameless plug. I'm going to kind of throw that out there. But you know, my grandfather's story, once again, it is one of a kind. And the foundation just shows how his mission is crystallized and how we manifest it within underserved, underprivileged communities. And also, thank you for what you do, because I know what you do. And thank you for that.
One more.
Hi there. As a minority and a female, I was really inspired by the females in the Wendell Scott family. And I was wondering if you guys could maybe mention, I know that Mary has deceased recently, maybe your best memory of Mary Scott and how she attributed to what is now the Wendell Scott Foundation.
Well, my mother told me that Grandma was always responsible for making sure the kids was educated and intelligent and good community people. She was also the religious anchor for our family. My mother traveled with them and helped them raise. She did some of the scoring, and they all have stories of, like they were saying, when they go on those long trips, Grandma packing up the car with food. They say my grandma could change a diaper, fix a plate, all while going 65 miles an hour, pulling the race car. But she was She had to be a very, very strong individual to deal with this very, very strong man. She took no shorts from him, but she also respected him as the husband and the leader of the family. She was remarkable in her own right, and just as strong and determined and involved with the community as he was.
I just remember my grandma just, absolutely, I just remember her, you know, just taking such good care of us. You know, I mean, man, I mean, you know, it hasn't been long since she's passed away, and you know, she took very, very, very good care of all of us.
She stood by her man.
Absolutely.
It was a good match, but he was
Mr.
weak, she was
Wilmore.
strong.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. I have a situation that's totally off from racing. And I was blessed to hear this. Look, God, now everything. Just with everything.
We're bringing you a mic. We can't hear you.
Y'all not ready to go, are you?
Winston gonna put us out of here. We'll let you go home.
Thank you. I was just inspired just a few minutes ago by Mr. Scott because some gentleman just said something that he and I never disagreed, except everything we said. But it's something coming forward from this Education Foundation that will inspire people, that will inspire them totally differently, because sometimes you have to do something to inspire children a little bit. Mr. Scott talked to me about the other day that no one in here, there are not 5 people in here know this. His father was a great musician. He was inspired, could have been a great pianist. No one understands that because we want to think car people are all greasy. This man had talent unbelievable. So when y'all talking about young children, make sure y'all find a way to weave that in. Mr. Scott was a great musician, please.
Good to know.
Who's bringing the mic over here too? Here we go.
We have one.
And this is the last one. And I'm gonna let the moderator do her thing.
Thank you. Thank you all for the work that you're doing. One question. Education has been a key topic here, and Ward, you alluded to some of the work that Mr. Scott has done, and you all are not race car drivers. What's the impact that Wendell Scott had upon the family, and Ms. Scott also had upon the family, in order for you to go into education and be a great educator, not only Mr. Scott to your family and your basketball team, but you've been a phenomenal principal to a region?
We didn't have an option. We didn't have the option not to go to school. We didn't have an option. Because he left school in the 8th grade to help take care of he grew up in a single parent home. He left school in the 8th grade to help take care of his mother and his sister. And he was determined that every one of us would have the opportunity to go to a first education. So we didn't have an option. We didn't have an option. Let me tell you the last thing. I'm going. We were going to Daytona Beach. 1965. We worked on the car. We got a car that Fred Lorenzo had totaled at Riverside. Rebuilt the car in 12 days. Did as much as we could on it. Put the motor in the car. We had pulling with a Cadillac limousine that a funeral home, Cunningham and Hughes, had gotten from an auction in Washington, D.C. They switched over from Cadillacs to Imperials. And with the car that we got was supposedly the car that President Eisenhower was chauffeured around in. It had bulletproof gas and airplane engine and everything in it. So we worked as hard as we could. We had to be there about 10 o'clock that next morning to sign in. So Dad, in this car, we had the children, my mother, my father, my 4 sisters. Anyway, it was about, I think it was 13 of us in that Cadillac. It had a seat you could let out, a bar seat, row seat. And so Dad said, well, we were counting hours, we needed 12 hours to get there. And we allowed 12 hours. So he asked me, he said, Frank, how you feel? He said, because he had just had half of his stomach cut out. He still had stitches. He had it, and so he said, "Can you drive a Daytona?" I said, "Yes, sir." So we loaded up, pulling with a tow bar. The back of that Cadillac was sitting about 10 inches off the ground. We had all of our toolboxes, our rear, everything. We gets down to Jacksonville that morning, about 7 o'clock that morning, and I meet a state man. And Dad was laying in the seat right beside me, and my mother was sitting on the outside. The rest of the family was in the back, on the other 2 rows. I said, "Oh, Lord, Dad, I just met the state man." You know what he told me? Take him to Daytona.
Thank you, everyone. We are running a little bit over. I hope that you all have gotten something from what you have witnessed. I would like for you all to take this time out and give our wonderful moderator a round of applause.
I had the easy job. This was easy. Let's give our panel another round of applause, and you give yourselves a round of applause too. So I have good news, I have bad news. I'll give you the bad news first. We are a little bit over on time, but clearly it was worth every single minute, right? I mean, this was worth it. And the good news is that we're signing autographs immediately outside the exit doors. We're going to have the Scott family is ready to go and ready to sign autographs for those of you that are interested in having them do that. Any other announcements that I need to make?
No, I just would like to say once again, thank you to everyone. Thank you to everyone that came out to sharing this special moment with us. And this is day 1 of Black History Month, which is every month, but this is day 1. So let's pull together and share this animated short, and let's make sure we get the message out to the world.
Give us your social media, your Twitter handle, your Instagram,
Yes.
so we can all share the story.
Wow. Social media. I'm not the social media guy. We are on Facebook. We are the Wendell Scott Foundation on Facebook. On Twitter, we are Wendell Scott _34. On Twitter, you can find us on Twitter. I'm not sure what we are on Instagram, but we are on Instagram. My daughter's sitting in it, but we have our social media icons and everything on all of our marketing paraphernalia as well. So you can definitely find us. Our website is www.wendellscott.org. Once again, www.wendellscott.org, and you can follow us. We have a blog, and we're constantly updating the website, providing you guys with information. I want to pass the mic.
Yeah, and you can also find the short on storycorps.org and on our Facebook and on our Twitter. It's online right now, so please find it either on StoryCorps or from Wendell Scott Foundation and share it far and wide.
And let me make this distinction too, and we've been talking about this, but the one thing we haven't said is that this animated short film will air on PBS as well.
Yeah, so the short has been made available to public television stations to use in their programming, so check your local listings for the future airings. They'll be there.
Awesome.
All right.
That's okay. I think that's it.
Get out of here.
All right.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
Thank you all.